So yesterday my MaxxAir fan stopped working, and this being summertime, I really need it to work. I need it to work all the time. I use it year-round mostly, but especially this being summertime, I need this thing to be working. So I figured out a small workaround for a short time. Let me show you that, and then I will try to figure out a solution to this problem. So since the fan is not working on my MaxxAir vent here, and I wanted some air movement, this is what I did. I took a computer fan that I had laying around, and I have it strung up here just to try to move a little bit of air in and out of the vents. So this solution is obviously just a temporary solution. This little computer fan I've been carrying around for quite some time. I actually don't remember where it came from, where I got it, but I've had it for several years, and I've hung on to it just for a situation like this. I've always had it in the back of my mind that if something happened to the MaxxAir fan, I would probably want some kind of fan going to help pull some air in and out of the van, especially if it was summertime like it is now. So I'm kind of happy I kept this little computer fan. Trouble is, it's a small fan, it's noisy, and it doesn't move a lot of air. So this is a temporary fix. Now, I've always carried a bag of spare electrical parts, something I felt is kind of important just in case something breaks late in the day or on a weekend, kind of like what happened to me here. So I was glad that I had this little fan, even though I don't remember where it came from. But I also had a couple of other things to kind of help make this work. I had a little motor control module that I bought a long time ago. I do remember where this came from. My first summer in the van, I made a bucket swamp cooler that I designed and built. And one of the things that I bought to make that bucket swamp cooler work was this little control. And I had bought it to run a 12-volt axial fan that was designed for a boat. And it worked quite well for that. And so I realized that I could use this little device to control the speed on this computer fan. If I just power this computer fan with a straight 12 volts, it would be very fast and very loud. Now, you're probably not going to be able to pick up quite how loud this fan is because of my microphone. Here it just doesn't work with that noise very well, but I can assure you it is remarkably loud. And even though it's really loud, it doesn't move a lot of air. So I really didn't want or need to run this fan at a full 12 volts. So I was glad that I had this little control module so that I could turn the fan down to a more reasonable speed. So the noise didn't drive me crazy, but it still moved a little bit of air to keep me comfortable in here. Now, since my electrical system here is all 12 volts, and I have a 12-volt cigarette lighter outlet that sits just up above my sink there, and in my bag of spare parts, I had a 12-volt cord. I was able to just take that 12-volt cord, I cut it in half, I ran one half of the cord up to the computer fan, and then I ran the other side of the cord over to the 12-volt plug. Now, when I realized that there was an issue with the fan, I got online, I found a troubleshooting guide, and that troubleshooting guide told me that I needed to take the fan apart and get to the control panel that is right under this, the control buttons. So that involves taking out some screws and popping the whole thing apart. It's really not very difficult, but once you've got it apart you can check the voltage that is coming into the control panel, and that's the only way to really tell if the control panel is working properly or not. So I read a few different troubleshooting guides, and they all said the same thing. They all said that you need the voltage that's coming into the control panel to be right about 12 volts. Now, there can be a little bit of fluctuation with that voltage, but it's got to be pretty close to 12 volts. If it is very far over or under 12 volts, then that could be a problem. The control panel won't work correctly, and you'll need to fix the wiring that's coming in, the power that's coming in. Now, in my case, I just did some wiring in the van just last week, and I was pretty sure that my voltage going into the fan was correct, even though the fan wasn't part of the wiring that I did last week. It was something that I had checked just because I was doing wiring and I had the voltmeter out anyway. So I was reasonably sure that the control panel here was getting enough voltage and the correct voltage, but I went ahead and took it apart anyway just to double check. You never know. When you're in a van that moves around, all that shaking and rattling and rolling can cause some issues with electronics, so you never know, something could go wrong. But I got it apart and put the leads of my voltmeter on and found out that I was getting perfect power to the control panel. That means that most likely the control panel is bad and I need to replace it. So this is good news, right? I know what the problem is. I know how to fix it. The control panel is pretty easy to pop out of there. There's just a few more screws to take out, and I could order a new one, and when that comes in, I could put the new control in and I'll be back up and running. Except not quite so easy. After doing a little bit of looking online, I noticed several retailers online that had this control panel for sale were sold out. And the few that did have a control in stock, the control seems to run about $100. Now that's bad news. I don't want to spend $100. Yes, I rely on this fan, but I don't want to spend $100 on a part unless I absolutely have to. So I have another idea in mind. Now obviously I can't keep using this little computer fan, it's just not going to move enough air. But I do have a motor speed controller. I do have some wiring. I can probably make this work to fix my fan and get me by for a while. Let me get it apart and then I will show you how I'm going to hook up the controller that I have, and hopefully it works. Well, there's the control panel. Does that look like it's worth $100 to you? Sure doesn't look like it's worth $100 to me. Okay, so this is the power that comes from my switch and fuse panel that comes into the controller, and this is the power that goes out of the controller that supplies power to the motor that spins the fan. What I need to do is I need to cut these wires and just install this control in place of this control. I wasn't paying attention and just kind of in the zone, and I clipped the power wire coming into the control before I pulled the fuse. So the fuse blew, and I just realized I don't have any more fuses. So once I get this all wired up, before I can even test it, I'm going to have to drive and go buy some more fuses. Actually, I don't need to go buy any more fuses to test. I have another fuse here which I can just test it, but I'll need to go and buy more fuses today once I'm done with the wiring. So the only critical thing that I need to be aware of, other than working on live wires like I just did, is with a MaxxAir fan, The positive wire is the black wire, and the negative wire is the white wire. And in my mind, negative should always be black, but this is how MaxxAir runs their wiring. So you just need to know that, because when we're going into this motor controller, we need to make sure that the wiring is correct going in. On the other side of the power, so the power coming out of the controller going to the fan, we don't need to be nearly as critical on, because the way the fan motor works is it'll spin in one direction if the positive is going in one side, and it'll spin in the other direction if the positive is going in the other side. So it's not real critical to get it wired up completely correctly on the motor side, but I do want to keep in mind that I normally like to use the fan as an exhaust fan. I normally like to suck air out of the van, mostly because I'm doing a lot of cooking and I have a floor vent, so I'm able to do that. I was going to put some disconnect connectors on the wires so that I could swap them around, but I don't have the right size quick disconnects. So I'm using wire nuts. I don't have the right size wire nuts either, but I'll have to get that. So I've just got one on for now for safety, and I'm going to crank this up. And that works. And by some stroke of luck, it's actually pulling air out of the van the right way I want it to go. So I now have a working fan, sort of. In between doing this and from some of the research I've done last night, just got one other thing to talk about. Okay, so to sum up, I am very happy that I got this working with parts that I have had on hand. Didn't need to spend any money, and these are parts that I've been carrying around for years, so that's a very good result. The thing that I am not so sure about is I'm not so sure that I want to replace this original controller. Now, it would be easy. I just am not sure that I want to spend $100 on a controller if I can find something that works just as well that's cheaper. Now, the problem is with this one, I have a couple of problems with this motor controller. For one, it just works in one direction, and I would prefer to be able to switch the fan around, having it either as an intake fan or an exhaust fan, although I use it mostly as an exhaust fan. But there's times where I really want to use it as an intake fan, and this controller doesn't give me that ability. The other thing is, this controller's not made very well. Back when I bought it originally, when it showed up, I was a little bit annoyed with the fit and finish of it. It's just not made very well. I've got some electrical tape on the back side of it here because there are some exposed wiring connections, and that kind of bothers me. So when I was doing some research on these controllers, I found that there are a bunch of controllers starting from about $8 and going up to about $30 that look like they're a little bit better made than this one, and also would give me that ability to switch the fan around to either direction. So I went into this thinking that I hope this works, but I'm kind of wiring it up here as a temporary solution. It might be a few days before I can decide on which controller I'm going to buy and then get it sent. So it'll be a few days using this one until I get a better controller, hopefully one that's safer and gives me all the functionality that this one does. That's the direction I'm leaning in. I think I will order a different controller, not one of the originals, and because it's going to give me all the functionality that I want and need without having to spend $100 on this one. Now, the other thing is this one might be able to be repaired, and I cut the wires. It left enough that I could just put this back in if this can be repaired. So lots of options going forward, but I kind of like the cheaper option, and so that's what I think I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to research what speed controller I'm going to get and order it. So that's it. Hopefully you found this helpful. I want to just reiterate this, that I am not an electrician. I'm not any kind of electronics guy. I'm just taking information that I'm getting from YouTube and the web and using the tools that I have, like my voltmeter, which again, I don't know how to use this. I just utilize YouTube and the web to tell me how to use this. And as long as I have this, I can use that information. Even if you don't know how to use one of these, I think it's really important to buy one and have one on hand. You can always find a video that will show you exactly how to use it. That's my 2 cents on this. And again, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just utilizing the information that's available. So, and for here, it's actually worked out very well. So I encourage you to do the same thing. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.